Welcome to Pretty Deadly with Cece, the podcast where beauty meets betrayal. I'm your host, Cece, and in today's episode, we're diving into one of the most heartbreaking and disturbing missing persons cases in American history. It's the story of a young mother who seemed to have everything: a husband, two beautiful little boys, and a future filled with promise. But behind closed doors, things were not what they appeared to be. On a cold December night in 2009, Susan Powell vanished from her home in West Valley City, Utah. She has never been found. And what happened after her disappearance would shock the entire nation. This is The Missing Mom. Who was Susan Powell? Before she became a headline, Susan Powell was simply Susan Cox. Friends described her as warm, intelligent, organized, and deeply devoted to her family. She met Joshua Powell through church activities, and the two married in 2001. Over the next several years, they built a life together and welcomed two sons, Charlie and Braden. To outsiders, they appeared to be a normal young family, but appearances can be deceiving. Behind the scenes, financial problems were mounting. Josh had filed for bankruptcy, and the family struggled with debt. More concerning were the reports from friends and relatives that the marriage was deteriorating. According to people close to Susan, she had become increasingly worried about her future. She reportedly confided in family and friends about marital issues. She discussed divorce, she documented concerns, and perhaps most chilling of all, she prepared for the possibility that something might happen to her. In a private document written before her disappearance, Susan described turmoil in her marriage. She wrote that if she died, it might not be an accident, even if it appeared to be one. Imagine feeling frightened enough to leave a statement like that behind. Imagine writing those words while raising two young children. At the time, nobody knew how prophetic they would sound. To understand this case, we need to discuss one of its most disturbing aspects: Josh's father, Stephen Powell. According to investigators, Stephen developed an unhealthy fixation on Susan. He secretly photographed her, recorded her, read her journals, and documented his obsession in writings and recordings that would later shock investigators. Years before Susan disappeared, Stephen allegedly confessed romantic feelings toward her. Susan rejected him. She and Josh eventually moved away from Washington to Utah, but the situation left a lasting impact on her life. This bizarre and disturbing family dynamic would later become a major focus of the investigation. Sunday, December 6th, 2009. This would be the last confirmed day Susan Powell was seen alive. That afternoon, she attended church services. Neighbors later reported seeing members of the family throughout the day. Susan wasn't feeling well and reportedly rested at home. Nothing about the day appeared extraordinary, but sometime after nightfall, something happened. And whatever happened changed everything. According to Josh Powell, shortly after midnight, he loaded his two small children into the family vehicle. Outside, winter weather was moving through Utah. Most families were asleep, but Josh claimed he decided this was the perfect time to go camping. Not tomorrow morning, not the following weekend, right then, after midnight, in freezing conditions, with two young boys. Investigators immediately found the story difficult to understand. Why would a father take children ages 2 and 4 camping in the middle of the night during a snowstorm? Why not wait until daylight? Why not tell anyone? Why miss work and daycare the next morning? Those questions would follow Josh for the rest of his life. When officers entered the Powell home on December 7th, several details stood out. Susan's purse remained behind. Personal belongings were still there. Most concerning, officers found 2 box fans blowing toward a wet spot inside the home. Why was the area wet? Why were fans drying it? And what exactly had happened there? Investigators later discovered traces of Susan's blood inside the residence. At this point, the case was no longer a routine missing person investigation. Something was terribly wrong. Among the most heartbreaking details in this case are statements later attributed to the Powell children. Investigators interviewed Charlie, the older son. According to police records, Charlie indicated that his mother had gone camping with them but did not come home. Years later, another comment would haunt those following the case. A teacher reportedly mentioned calling Charlie's mother. His response? "My mom is dead." Children can misunderstand events. Memories can be imperfect. But many investigators considered the statement significant. And still, Susan remained missing. No body, no confession, no answers. Only questions. As investigators continued examining Josh Powell's story, one detail immediately stood out: the mileage. After Susan disappeared, detectives learned Josh had rented a vehicle shortly before the disappearance. When they examined records connected to his movements, they discovered something troubling. Hundreds of miles had been driven that investigators could not fully account for. Where had he gone? Why had he traveled so far? And what was so important that it required a journey in the days surrounding Susan's disappearance? Police began looking closely at remote desert locations throughout Utah. Abandoned mine shafts, desolate mountain roads, vast stretches of wilderness where a person could disappear forever. The theory was chilling. If someone wanted to hide evidence, Utah offered endless possibilities. Search crews spent years following leads. Helicopters flew over remote terrain. Cadaver dogs searched isolated areas. Volunteers combed deserts and forests. But Susan was never found. No matter where investigators looked, they always came back empty-handed. And without a body, proving exactly what happened became nearly impossible. In many modern investigations, technology tells a story, and Susan Powell's case was no exception. Investigators discovered Susan had been documenting concerns about her marriage. Friends reported that she had spoken about fear, about control, about wanting a different future. Then came one of the most unsettling discoveries. Susan had created evidence in case something happened to her. Think about that. A young mother in her 20s believed strongly enough that she might be harmed that she prepared materials for investigators. Not because she was planning to disappear, not because she was running away, because she feared something might happen. For many people following the case, this became one of the most significant pieces of context. It wasn't proof, but it painted a picture of a woman who appeared worried about her safety. As pressure mounted, investigators turned their attention to the Powell family, particularly Stephen Powell. The more detectives learned about Stephen's obsession with Susan, the more disturbing the story became. Thousands of photographs, private recordings, personal writings, hidden videos. Investigators uncovered evidence showing Stephen had spent years fixated on his daughter-in-law. The revelations shocked the public. It was unlike anything most people had ever heard. Meanwhile, investigators also examined the actions of other family members. Questions emerged about whether people knew more than they admitted, whether information had been withheld, whether evidence had been concealed. No one was ever charged in connection with Susan's disappearance. Yet suspicion continued to surround multiple members of the Powell family for years. And still, the central question remained unanswered. Where was Susan? Years passed, then more years. Birthdays came and went. Holidays passed. Her family continued searching. Investigators followed lead after lead. Psychics claimed to know where she was. Anonymous tipsters called police. Internet forums filled with theories. Abandoned mines, national parks, storage units, remote deserts. Each new lead sparked hope, and each time, hope faded. The case became one of America's most infamous missing person mysteries. Because unlike many cases, investigators publicly stated they believed they knew Susan had been murdered. What they didn't know was where she was. And that missing piece changed everything. Without a body, prosecutors faced an enormous challenge. How do you prove murder when the victim cannot be found? How do you tell a jury exactly what happened when the most important evidence is still missing? As the investigation continued, Susan's parents fought for custody of Charlie and Braden. The boys had lost their mother. Now, questions surrounded their father. Courts became involved, social workers became involved, and eventually, Josh Powell's access to the children became restricted. The situation was tense, emotional, and increasingly concerning. Professionals involved in the case worried about Josh's behavior. Many believed he was under tremendous pressure. Investigators continued examining his actions. The public continued watching. No one knew just how tragic the story was about to become. February 5th, 2012. It was supposed to be a supervised visitation, a routine meeting. One social worker, 2 little boys, 1 father. Nothing more. But within moments, everything changed. As the boys arrived at Josh's home, he reportedly grabbed them and pulled them inside. The social worker immediately sensed something was wrong. She attempted to intervene. She called emergency services. But events unfolded quickly, terribly quickly. Before help could arrive, Josh carried out an act so horrific it stunned the nation. The house erupted in flames. Inside were Josh Powell, Charlie Powell, and Braden Powell. None survived. The tragedy devastated investigators, devastated Susan's family, devastated everyone who had followed the case. Because in a matter of minutes, the person many believed held the answers was gone forever. And so were the 2 children caught in the center of the mystery. Today, investigators continue to classify Susan Powell as missing and presumed dead. No body has ever been recovered. No one has ever been convicted. And despite years of investigation, the exact location of Susan remains unknown. Theories continue to exist. Some believe she was hidden in a remote desert area. Others believe she was placed in an abandoned mine shaft. Some think evidence still exists waiting to be discovered. But all these years later, one heartbreaking reality remains. Susan has never come home. Her family has never been able to bury her. And 2 little boys never got the chance to grow up. Susan Powell was more than a case file, more than a headline, more than a mystery. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a mother. And somewhere, her story still waits for its final chapter. If you have thoughts about this case, let me know. And join me next week as we continue Season 1, Vanished. I'm Cece, and this has been Pretty Deadly with Cece. Because sometimes, the most dangerous secrets are hidden behind the most ordinary lives.